On the high seas of battle, they are the first to attack. Their name alone says it all: Destroyer. This is the story of two ships with the same name. Outgunned and overwhelmed, the first fights to the death against enemies 10 times her size. The second withstands a swarm of 22 kamikazes in just 80 minutes, leaving a third of her crew dead or wounded. What kind of ship stands up to this kind of punishment? What kind of men refuse defeat? The USS Laffey will earn its nickname as the ship that would not die. In the summer of 1942, the battle for Guadalcanal and the Solomon Islands has turned into a drawn-out war of attrition.
Throughout the Southwest Pacific, the Japanese were expanding beyond what might have been anticipated.
America's losses in the early August Battle of Savo Island have interrupted supply lines, leaving the Marines on shore undersupplied. Malaria and malnutrition become as threatening as bullets.
The official name of the operation was Operation Watchtower. The Marines, though, as of the third day, began to call it Operation Shoestring. They don't have enough of anything. They don't have enough food. They don't have enough ammunition.
America's first attempt to blunt Japanese expansion is headed towards crushing defeat. Finding themselves under attack at every turn, the American Pacific Fleet needs more ships to join the fight. It is into this bleak situation that the destroyer USS Laffey, DD-459, enters the war. Built by Bethlehem Shipbuilding Company, DD-459 is named in honor of Bartlett Laffey, a Civil War Medal of Honor recipient who piloted the stern-wheel gunboat Memora through an intense Confederate attack. It is this fighting spirit that will live on in the Laffey name. A Bristol-class destroyer, Laffey is armed with 4 5-inch mounts, 5 20mm mounts, and 5 21-inch torpedo tubes. She displaces 1,620 tons, is 348 feet in length, and has a maximum speed of 33 knots. Although smaller and less heavily armed than other ships, Laffey is a lethal combination of speed, maneuverability, and firepower. The American war machine is in full motion as Laffey takes to the water for the first time. With Lieutenant Commander William Hank commanding, Laffey receives combat orders almost immediately, and the ship is allowed only a short shakedown cruise before speeding to the war zone. Laffey joins the American Pacific Force just south of the Solomon Islands. It is from here that American forces are staging their fight for Guadalcanal. Marines on the island are suffering terrible losses. Although they have captured and completed the strategic Henderson airfield, it is not enough to ensure them supplies, and Japanese resistance remains strong. The U.S. Navy is forced into a defensive strategy, struggling to hold and supply the island. The Marines on shore are left hanging on to what they have, as both sides race to strangle the other's lifeline of convoys.
The Japanese will do all that they can to land troops and to supply those troops and to protect them. The United States and the Allies are going to be doing exactly the same. The side that can best handle the logistics is the one that will emerge victorious.
Laffey immediately steams into action. In mid-September, she joins a supply convoy heading to Guadalcanal. Leading the formation, she screens the larger ships, looking for enemy submarines. But as the convoy moves to open waters, unseen dangers lurk below.
A Japanese submarine manages to slip in and fire torpedoes.
I was asleep down below in between meals, between lunch and dinner, and I heard it was boom, da-doom. They really snuck in on us with that Japanese submarine and hit the USS Wasp. When I came on topside, I could see her listing, smoking, and down at the bow, and she was burning, and before I knew it, she started burning from fore to aft.
Flames tear through Wasp's hangar deck, igniting aviation fuel and setting off a series of explosions. Soon, she's nothing but a mass of flames, and the waters surrounding her bow are a sea of burning oil. Laffey searches for the submarine, dropping depth charges and watching what unfolds on the Wasp.
The members of the ship were told to abandon ship. I could see them coming off the ship on lines dropping into the sea or just diving into the sea.
Thick burning oil covers the water and makes rescue difficult. Laffey maneuvers through it, plucking out survivors until her decks are crowded with the half-drowned, oil-covered men. But as darkness falls, the oil makes it hard to spot the remaining survivors. To stay in the area any longer places all the ships in danger. No one knows how many more submarines may be lurking below the oil slick, preparing to attack. The ships are ordered to abandon their search and leave any remaining men in the water. Laffey turns toward the American base at Espiritu Santo.
It was a tragedy that day because I don't know how that submarine got in and we were screening her. I don't know where she came from.
By the end of September, America's foothold on Guadalcanal is far from secure, and Japanese attacks continue to devastate the convoys and interrupt the flow of supplies.
So Japan takes a definite edge. They attack en masse, flying planes down from as far away as Rabaul to try to attack the American ships that were unloading.
Slipping down the slot from their base at Rabaul, Japan's supply convoy, known as the Tokyo Express, delivers troops and supplies to the island with depressing regularity. Newly assigned to Task Force 64, Laffey joins Rear Admiral Norman Scott's cruiser group known as Task Force Sugar. Along with a force of heavy cruisers, light cruisers, and destroyers, the Laffey departs the American base at Espiritu Santo, determined to derail the Japanese. Patrolling off the southwest coast, an American aircraft spots a Japanese bombardment group of 3 cruisers and 2 destroyers, followed by a reinforcement group of 2 seaplane carriers and 6 more destroyers, steaming down the slot, headed for Lunga Point. Admiral Scott immediately orders his ships around to the western side of the island, between Cape Esperance and Savo Island, where they prepare to intercept. At 11:25 p.m., the cruiser Helena makes radar contact with the approaching enemy.
Rear Admiral Norman Scott is coming up from Lunga Point, and the Japanese are coming down the slot, as they always do, and he turns and caps the T. The ships in line across the top of the T can pull all of their guns into action. And the ships that are coming at you can use only their forward guns, and even the ships behind the first one, they have to be real careful if they want to shoot straight ahead. They may be blowing off the top of one of their own ships. Admiral Scott realizes that he is about to lose the T, so he orders all of his ships to turn left. The 3 destroyers, the Laffey and the other 2 that are out front, really have to go full flank speed to try to catch back up.
As Laffey and her sister ships race back to position, the ships open fire.
I was in number 2 gun hole. I could hear the guns rumbling from fore to aft. You could feel each gun and you know which one was being fired. We did quite a bit of damage to the Imperial Japanese Navy.
In less than 15 minutes, Task Force Sugar sinks both an enemy cruiser and destroyer and severely damages the Japanese flagship Aoba. Damaged and disoriented, the Japanese force retreats. As Laffey races back to rearm at Espirito Santo, her crew celebrates for the first time. But unbeknownst to them, their victory has fallen short.
The Battle of Cape Esperance is a tactical victory. The strike force for the Japanese does turn and retire. Unfortunately, what their purpose was to keep this force that they ran into from disrupting the boats that were bringing in troops, and those boats do manage to get onto Guadalcanal, so it's a bit of a qualified victory.
On shore, the Marines have no reason to celebrate. Instead of American naval victories, all they see is the steady stream of Japanese troops that continue to flow onto the island. They feel alone, abandoned by a navy that cannot keep the enemy out or get the supplies they need in.
They are not feeling real good toward the Navy because they feel that the Navy has run out on them.
But for Laffey, the fight is just beginning. Rearmed, she races back to Guadalcanal and into a battle from which she will not return. In early November of 1942, Marines on Guadalcanal face a desperate situation. American convoys remain vulnerable to Japanese air and submarine attack. Supplies on the island are barely adequate, and the Navy fears that a major enemy thrust is imminent. As Laffey screens a convoy of critical supplies and reinforcements en route to the island, her crew is on full alert, ready for whatever threat may appear.
We were running like a picket line as the Americans were bringing in troops to reinforce themselves to make sure that they can hold on to Guadalcanal. But what happened was there was a terrific air attack.
Laffey's guns open fire, filling the sky with flak and ordnance as Japanese bombers dive towards the troops and supply vessels heading into shore. As Laffey fights off the air attack, Captain Hank is delivered chilling news. A Japanese force of 2 battleships, 1 cruiser, and 14 destroyers are headed towards Longa Point to unleash their firepower on the Marines. With no other American ships in the area, the crew knows their small task force will be called upon to stop them. As darkness falls and the attack finally stops, Laffey and her group of only 5 cruisers and 8 destroyers prepare to take on the vastly superior Japanese fleet.
Cruisers and destroyers don't like to fight battleships, but you have to go with what you've got.
Believing the Japanese are unaware they are spotted, Admiral Callahan decides their best bet hinges on the element of surprise and orders the task force to engage them head-on. The ships form a single column, with Laffey as the second in line, and steam towards the approaching Japanese. But as they head out, problems become apparent.
The ships that have radar are not up front where the Laffey is. That's where they should be. They're back in the back. The ships in the back can see the Japanese coming on radar. But then they begin to try to communicate this to the other ships, and the radio circuits are so jammed, nobody's communicating. There are too many people trying to talk at the same time. There wasn't time for instructions from the admiral as to how they were going to conduct the battle.
Outnumbered and outgunned, Admiral Callahan's ships are unknowingly heading directly into the middle of the vastly stronger Japanese force.
Friday, November the 13th, at 0200 hours, we went into battle stations. General quarters, enemy ahead, we're going into battle.
The lights come on, the star shell goes up. Everybody now knows where everybody is.
But as the sky lights up, Admiral Callahan sees for the first time his task force is surrounded on all sides by Japanese ships, with only 1,600 yards between them.
But our guns were being fired so fast, it sounded like a staccato. Boom, 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 boom.
Attempting to deliver as much damage as she can, Laffey unleashes a spread of torpedoes while firing her 5-inch and intermediate guns. But she is no match for what is coming at her.
And the ship that's bearing down on her is a battleship that's carrying 14-inch guns.
Only 1,000 yards away and headed on a collision course with her port side is the Japanese battleship Hiei, flagship to Vice Admiral Hiroaki Abe. As Captain Hank orders an emergency full ahead, Laffey locks her guns on the battle wagon.
Now, they said that we have both headed for the same spot. I could see the Japanese sailors running back and forth on their ship. That's how close we were.
With only 20 feet to spare, Hiei scrapes the stern of the Laffey. As the ship passes, Laffey's guns flail away, raking the battleship's bridge and superstructure and killing several of the admiral's staff. But as the ships separate, Laffey finds herself surrounded by 2 battleships and 2 destroyers. Within seconds, shells are splashing all around her.
"14-inch shells hit the bridge of the Laffey, and they hit the number 2 gun mount.
The blow to the bridge has knocked out many vital controls, leaving Laffey slow and disoriented. Inside mount number 2, the men are vaporized.
The Laffey takes a torpedo in the stern. This stops her. And then just after that, the battleship that hit her the first time hits her with one more 14-inch salvo.
Then the ship went dead. I came up topside and there was bodies all over the place. I had never seen so much blood in all my life.
Laffey's fantail has been blown almost completely off. Fires rage topside and through her decks below. Realizing he has no other options, Captain Hank gives the order to abandon ship. Those who are able begin bringing out the wounded and loading them into rafts.
We were bringing the wounded out to get ready to abandon ship. The last time I saw Captain Hank he was on the forecastle deck, and he yelled at me, "Julius, didn't you hear me say abandon ship? The fantail is gone." And right after that, I heard a boom. And I was sailing into the air.
Overheated by the fires, after magazines number 3 and 4 explode, within minutes, Laffey is swiftly sinking.
And I finally came up. Half of my life preserver was blown off. My left arm was dead. My right eye was shut. The bow come up out of the water and just slip right down into the water. And I could see the numbers 459. I said, well, she's gone. So I know that Captain Hank went down with the ship.
Only 228 days since her commissioning, the destroyer USS Laffey, DD-459, is dead. She takes with her 59 of her 247 men, leaving another 116 severely wounded. The battle that sinks her rages on for 2 more days, with Japan's losses totaling 2 battleships, 1 cruiser, and 3 destroyers. What will go down in history as the naval battle of Guadalcanal ends in a victory for the Americans and secures the fate of the island and the Marines on shore.
This is the last major push that the Japanese make to reinforce Guadalcanal. The Japanese then will gradually begin to pull their troops out, and by February, they have evacuated.
The island is finally secured, and America now firmly holds a base in the South Pacific from which to launch even greater campaigns against the Japanese. In the fight for Guadalcanal, the USS Laffey has given her life, but accomplished her mission. But the Laffey name will not rest for long, and when this new Laffey faces off against the Japanese, the score will be much different. On Friday the 13th of November 1942, USS Laffey, DD-459, is pounded to death in the naval battle of Guadalcanal.
Somewhat ironically, one of the destroyers coming up behind her is the Aaron Ward, and the executive officer of the Aaron Ward is Commander Julian Beckton, and he will become the commanding officer of the destroyer Laffey 724.
As Beckton watches the Laffey go under, he has no way of knowing that in just a few short months, Japanese bombers will be sending his ship to join her. No sooner has Laffey settled on the ocean floor than the building torches of America's shipbuilding machine are blazing away, building her namesake. Designated DD-724, she is part of the newer and more heavily armed Allen M. Sumner class of destroyers. On February 8, 1944, less than 1 year after losing his own ship, the man who watched the first Laffey sink takes command of the USS Laffey DD-724.
Commander Beckton was out for revenge because he had one ship shot out from underneath him, the Aaron Ward. He was just gung-ho to make amends for what they did to him.
But before he can reap his revenge in the South Pacific, Commander Beckton and the Laffey first join a convoy bound for England as part of Operation Neptune, the naval portion of Operation Overlord. Laffey's first opportunity to prove herself in battle will be on the front lines of the greatest amphibious force the world will ever see. In the pre-dawn darkness, Laffey departs for Utah Beach. As the ships close in on the shoreline, it is her 5-inch guns that are called into action first.
Other ships in our squadron fired maybe 100 or 200 rounds. We fired almost 1,000. They knew we could hit what we were told to hit.
But even with Laffey's pinpoint firepower covering the troops at Utah, the beach is not suitable to unloading larger, heavier equipment, and an alternate route must be found. Laffey is called away for a new mission. Located approximately 30 miles from the Utah beach landings is the city of Cherbourg. As the closest deep-water port to the Allied landings, Cherbourg is needed to unload supplies and reinforcements more quickly and effectively.
We were called up to Cherbourg because the German 88th was holding the army back.
But heavy German gun emplacements and fortifications must be taken out first. Entering the harbor at Cherbourg means putting the American ships in range of the powerful 11-inch guns of Battery Hamburg.
We were in so close that you could see these things coming through the air at you. You could actually see these big projectiles coming right at you.
Behind the protection of the destroyer screen, the heavy guns of the bombardment ships blast away, with the battleship Texas landing a 14-inch shell squarely on Battery Hamburg, finishing the gun and destroying the Germans' last chance of resistance. Their mission a success, the bombardment group heads out of the harbor and Laffey gets her first chance to assess damage.
We didn't know we were hit, first of all. The electrician's mate back aft realized there was something wrong.
And so they went compartment to compartment to compartment, looking for the place where the electrical lines were broken. And there they found this 11-inch shell.
400 pounds of unexploded ordnance is lodged in the port side of the Laffey. Captain Becton's order to the damage control party is short and to the point. Get it the hell off the ship. With surgeon's precision, the damage control party carefully pries the monstrous ordnance loose and then gently lowers it off the ship. But before it slips beneath the waves, the men notice Czechoslovakian markings etched into the casing and realize an incredible stroke of luck has saved them.
Somebody in a forced labor factory made it their business to be sure this was a dud.
But the damage is still substantial, and Laffey must head back for repairs before taking on her next assignment, where she will go to the doorstep of Japan and earn the nickname, the ship that would not die.
There was no question in our mind about how serious this was. We knew that we were fighting for our lives.
In the early morning hours of December 7, 1944, as part of Admiral Kincaid's 7th Fleet, the USS Laffey DD-724 arrives off the coast of Leyte Island, determined to put the Army's 77th Division ashore at Ormoc Bay. Located between Japan proper and Borneo, Leyte Island is critical to the flow of oil that keeps the Japanese war machine fueled. As the fleet closes in on the islands, a cloud descends over them. American advances through the previous year had shifted the tide of the Pacific War, sending the Japanese on the retreat from many of their island fortresses. In October of 1944, in a desperate attempt to combat the onslaught, the Japanese develop a new and terrifying weapon.
A Japanese admiral goes to the Philippines to meet with the air group commander. He proposes an experiment. Japanese pilots fly their bomb-laden planes into American carriers with a human guidance system. They recall that in 1281, when Kublai Khan was preparing to invade Japan, then an out-of-season typhoon came up and destroyed Kahn's ships. It was felt that it had to be divine intervention. The Japanese needed another miracle. They needed another divine wind. They needed kamikaze pilots.
On December 7, 1944, Japan's Divine Wind delivers approximately 30 kamikaze attacks on the Laffey and her sister ships for over 10 hours. Laffey continues covering the troops who pour out of the transports and flood onto the beaches until it is too dark for the Japanese pilots to attack. As night falls around them and the transports are finally empty, the ships head back out to sea, and the crew of the Laffey realizes how lucky they are. Soon they will get an up-close view of what could have been.
Hughes was not part of our task group, but they were hit by a suicide plane and we were asked to assist them.
They were powerless. They were just drifting in the water and they were floating. And so we had to come alongside and take her in tow. We took the crippled people off and got them to the hospital ship. That was the first time I got to smell burnt flesh.
We could not understand why they would be sacrificing their lives by crash diving an airplane into a ship.
There was no question in our mind about how serious this was. We knew that we were fighting for our lives.
Just 350 miles south of Japan sits the volcanic island of Okinawa. Buried deep within its nightmarish landscape in a labyrinth of caves and tunnels are over 77,000 Japanese combat soldiers. Only death or victory will get them off the island.
Allied major interest is in Okinawa is it is the perfect staging ground for the invasion of Japan.
On Easter Sunday, April 1st, 1945, approximately 50,000 troops head toward the beaches, prepared for the expected onslaught of mortars, shells, machine guns, and other ordnance that met the landing forces at Iwo Jima only weeks before. But as the troops hit the beaches, the violent resistance never comes.
The Japanese, they're going to go ahead and let them come in, but to have a defense in depth.
On shore, the Japanese troops wait like spiders, springing from their traps to slaughter hundreds of men a day. American advances are measured by yards. Offshore, Navy ships ordered to stay and provide bombardment cover are ready targets for the Divine Wind.
To defend against these kamikazes, 19 picket stations are set up around Okinawa.
If you'll picture a baseball field, home plate is Okinawa. Japan is second base. And out there, forming an arc between first base and third base, you would find the picket ships.
The main purpose was to warn the Navy of the presence of suicide planes so the other ships in the harbor could be prepared to resist them.
Laffey receives orders to report to Radar Picket Station Number 1, the closest position to the Japanese mainland.
We received the message on Friday the 13th, so immediately we felt that something was going to happen to us. We just had kind of a feeling.
As USS Laffey DD-724 steams towards Radar Picket Station Number 1, her gun crews prepare for battle. At Normandy, they fired more 5-inch shells than any other destroyer, and now they prepare to do the same at Okinawa. They have no idea they will more than double their record. At 8:20 a.m., Commander Becton receives a message that 50 bogies are closing in from the north.
General quarters was sounded, and that's when the first 4 planes came in and attacked us.
The first one gets knocked down a little over 4 miles out. That's good. The 5th one inside of a mile. That's getting awfully close.
I could see the planes coming right at you.
The first hit we got was on the fantail.
The wing of that plane hit the back end. We had a terrible fire for what amounted to 2 decks.
The thing that I thought about every time one of those planes would hit, who got hurt, who's my friend, and of course I didn't know.
In less than 20 minutes, 11 enemy planes dive on the Laffey, destroying the after 5-inch twin mount, 140mm mount, and 5 of her 20mm guns. Gasoline from the planes flood Laffey's deck, sending flames tearing through her hull.
Halfway through the action, one of the Japanese planes dropped a bomb off of our fantail while we were making a left turn at 27 degrees left. The bomb jammed our rudder, so all we could do after that was go in circles.
Another plane was coming in directly at gun mount number 3 and made a direct hit.
On the bridge, Captain Becton shouts orders to damage control and engineering, trying to keep the Laffey afloat. But even as the damage mounts, he never ceases giving orders to fight. From mangled gun decks, men continue to load and fire against the enemy.
And I remember Commander Becton saying, "I will never abandon ship as long as I have a gun to fire."
Kamikazes continue their relentless attack as 11 more planes dive on the Laffey, hurling themselves at incredible speed. 2 find their mark in the after deckhouse. 2 more strafe her while 1 shears off part of the mast. 3 land bombs.
We transmitted all the information that was going on. The fleet knew about it, and I'm sure that the Marines and the Army knew about it.
Well, as you can imagine, after an hour and 20 minutes of constant combat, you wonder, when is this ever going to end? And then there was several minutes of quiet. We looked above, and we saw 24 Marine planes. They were crisscrossing over us to protect us. And that had to be the most wonderful feeling in the world.
With solid cover from the American planes overhead, the attack ends as suddenly as it began. The remaining suicide planes are shot down or chased off. Laffey is left a twisted hulk of a ship, her stern almost destroyed. 22 Japanese planes have directly attacked her. 7 kamikazes and 4 bombs have hit their mark.
Physically, the back part of the ship was just a mess. The main deck was completely riddled and broken up.
In just 80 minutes, 32 sailors are dead and over 70 wounded. A third of the crew are casualties.
Well, after the action was over, I had a packet of morphine, which I went around and helped the wounded. And those were pretty bad. We gave a shot of morphine. And the reason why you cry is because, why me? When all the others were killed. I guess that's it.
But although the damage is staggering, there is no questioning whether Laffey will survive. Amazingly, 2 watertight doors contain the flooding, while Laffey's pump system works to drain the water. Uninjured crewmen form damage control parties that fight winning battles against the flames. In the weeks that follow, the ships at Okinawa will suffer many more suicide attacks, but none more intense than that which the USS Laffey fought off.
Many disorganized enemy personnel are captured during the last phase of the operation.
Although the Americans will eventually go on to capture Okinawa, the price has been high. On June 21, 1945, victory over the island is declared. Over 12,000 Americans are dead. Laffey is towed back to the American base at Karamaretta for temporary repairs before returning to the United States.
She was able to go back to Seattle on her own power. And for a week, she was open to the public.
This was a big drive, a big bond drive by the government. The people were lined up 4 or 5 deep and for 2 blocks long, just waiting for a chance to visit the ship and see just what the damages were. This war wasn't something that was simple and needed help from them to supply the things that were necessary for the winning of it.
Newspapers across the country echo America's fascination and sentiment for their newfound celebrity, the ship that would not die. She is awarded the Presidential Unit Citation as her exploits off Okinawa are told from coast to coast. The honeymoon will be short. When the war ends less than 3 months later, Laffey is left sitting quiet and alone in Seattle, her fame fading as quickly as it rose in a nation of Americans ready to forget the horrors of war. In the years that follow, the ship that would not die continued to live on.
Broke out and they brought her back out in 1950. She went to Wonsan Harbor, had the longest ship-to-shore battle in the Korean War.
On March 29, 1975, after 31 years of service, Laffey's engines go silent for the final time. The USS Laffey DD-724 is slated to be sunk as a target.
They went to work on saving her in Washington, and that's when the Laffey Association was formed.
Finally, in April of 1982, the USS Laffey is pulled into a dock at Patriots Point in Charleston Harbor, South Carolina. She takes her place alongside another great hero of World War II, the carrier USS Yorktown. Once again, through the efforts of her crew, Laffey has survived.
I want to keep this ship around because she was my home. That meant a lot to me. She took me to war, but she brought me home. And I feel very obligated to her.
Twice a year, men of the USS Laffey still come aboard to shine, polish, and maintain her glorious past for the thousands of visitors who walk her decks where men fought and died. Her legacy will never be forgotten. The ship that would not die lives on.